colonial system here. And this is also, I think, where part of the concern comes from, where people are now worried that they're going to lose their property rights under this new system. So they want protection, the same kinds of protections that they think are there for Aboriginals or people. So they
I
want to
can
become part of the ASMIN community. Is that accurate?
I understand their concern, but then again, remember I said they don't teach, they don't educate. Under Canadian law, there's the Expropriation Act. They can take your land anytime they want. I also mentioned earlier in this conversation is that your mortgage or your deed to your title.
No, but to back up, yeah, they can expropriate land, but
okay,
in practice, they do provide compensation generally at least market value or above.
Yes, and I'm getting to that, Rick. You're correct.
Sure.
Quite right. But where we're looking at Aboriginal rights or lands being reverted back to the Aboriginal people, the Canadian government or its predecessors stole that land without treaty. Go back to the Constitution of Canada and the Royal Proclamation. You can't do fraud. You can't steal the land of Aboriginal people. It's ingrained in the Constitution. It's part 1 of the Constitution of those rights. You took our land, you stole it under the Indian Act. You have to compensate us. So it's no different than they want to put a highway through your property. You're gone because you just have a certificate of occupation. They will compensate you. There's an example right now is just on the news on the North Shore of Georgian Bay. There's an island that people have had cottages for 100 years, and they're expropriating all of that and giving it back to the First Nation, which is a band under the Indian Act, and they're turning it back into a ecological land again, a nature preserve or whatever, right? But they're going to be compensated. And there's other examples all over that in Ontario that the Indian Affairs back before the 60s rented out land to non-Aboriginals on the reserve, and they're still there, and they're eventually removing them. So in regards to a major land claim, okay, people aren't going to lose their land. That's fear-mongering by the government to cause confusion as far as I'm concerned, because there's a process. And a lot of these processes on what they call under the Indian Act, addition to reserve, takes time. When I was with Indian Affairs back, or Environment Canada in 1980, they were talking about an addition to reserve, one of the reserves in North Shore, Georgian Bay, and they still haven't completed it because those people haven't got to a point where they're selling their property, and that's when the government comes in. There's a process. It's well established in Canadian law. This fear mongering about I'm going to lose my property, they're getting rights back, but you're sitting on stolen land. And under the Criminal Code of Canada, if you got something stolen, that's a criminal violation. So how, when you look
at
the
yeah, I'm following what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that some of these people who are using the ASMIN name are exploiting that fear to get people to pay the fees to become part of their communities?
Yeah. Exactly, Rick. It's the whole thing. There's so many layers in what they're doing to the ASMIN. There's so many layers. I'm just peeling it,
And because your name has been attached to this for a long time, we're now hearing from you guys that we have RCMP, Indian Affairs, we have probably the FBI and maybe even CSIS investigating this. I don't know if formal investigations have been opened, but you're certainly in conversation with them and have lodged, I guess, formal complaints asking for an investigation or investigations into this as a possible international case of multiple cases, possibly of fraud on a huge scale, massive story, massive issue. Where does am I on the right track here?
Well, it's huge. It's huge. And where it is that be coming out of surgery and being ill for the last 6 years, right?
Yeah.
That's elder abuse. It's abusing a medically incapacitated person. I'm just coming out of it and I realize things are wrong. But for me, or I'm way up north trying to figure out what they're doing. They're not telling me. Sometimes when to kill a scam, you got to counter scam. You got to figure it out. You got to lull them into a false sense of security so you can get the information. Once I got enough information that I could make a complaint to the government, I did it. And that's where we are. So,
and so speaking of government, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One more point.
Sure.
In these type of scams, the first reaction for most people, and I was in the regulatory authority for a long time with the feds in the province, right? I did this stuff, these investigations, right?
Yeah.
People always seem to blame the victim. Well, why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't you do, how come you didn't know, right? Well, if you got a really good scam, you don't know. And it's really hard to figure out what the heck's going on. Well, we'll tell you later. And it's okay. We've got it handled. You got all this great stuff going into the courts, but it's all bogus. And I'll go to the Ask It for Equity. You under the UNDRIP and some of the other, I think it's Deschantel and some of the other ones, you can have an Aboriginal tribunal. But you got to be Aboriginal. You got to be a member of a community. So that one lawyer setting up the Ask It, which is ASMIN and Kinniqui Judicial Tribunal. Where's your Aboriginal? Well, he put me on there as a Chief Justice. I've never done anything in it, but I find out they're putting emails out of my name and communicating with people. I had nothing to do with that tribunal. Then they set up the AIN, Alliance of Indigenous Nation Judicial Tribunal, doing all kinds of submissions into courts and everything, and orders and everything, and there's no Aboriginals that are running it. So how is that an Aboriginal tribunal, not based on anything other than their con? It looks good because there was a treaty that I suggested, and I went down to Bolivia, met with the presidents down there. They wanted to set up an international Aboriginal United Nations, working on it. They wanted to reestablish the Eagle and the Condor prophecy. I brought back, suggested it. Some people were doing a really good job writing up this treaty. They started the treaty up, and then all of a sudden there's this AIN Judicial Tribunal doing international cases into court, and the people running it were disbarred judges and lawyers and non-Aboriginal.
Yeah, and I think that one of those disbarred lawyers actually ran for mayor in Toronto, and he's connected with one of these groups as well. I don't know if it's wise to really mention his name here.
It's difficult when but people need to know that there's something going on that is not right. And people do get duped. That's what they call cons. And that's what they call scams. And that's what they call internet scam. And you put it on the internet and you're explaining all these benefits you get. Like one thing, when they had the Tumult Trust up, Rick, you get 50% return on your money right on the website. Came down pretty damn quick.
To explain what the Tumult Trust is.
Damned if I know, to tell the truth, and I'll be polite because I've asked for a definition for that.
I can answer a little of that, but please do take note. There is open investigation. There is open case files. So it does kind of gag us to not be able to speak a lot.
And we should also state that any of the allegations related to any investigations or any possible illegal activity have not been proven in court. So
everything that I've said has been alleged. I verily believe that the things that I'm saying would be accurate. I should have said that up front, but I forgot.
Yeah,
it totally is. So let's just note that this Tumult Trust was a trust of Turtle Island that you were supposed to put your assets, your house, your car, gold mine, anything that was yours to put into the Tumult, which went back to askitforequity.com page and link as well. It is currently under full investigation as well. So again, I state that with all sincerity. There are case files already assigned. The investigations are moving forward, and it does kind of bind us to what we can say. But Tumult, if anybody also Tumult, or you're one of those people that was in the AIN and you were given an AIN order, please note the downfall that is coming from that. As recent as over the last 2 to 3 weeks, people are using or trying to use those orders. They have no standing. They are not binding. please come forward and contact us as well, so we can deal with any of those orders and have them addressed and accounted for as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, is
Well,
it because of your past involvement with these people, these organizations, it must be fair to assume that they're probably investigating you as well, wondering how legitimate you are, how sincere you are in your assertions here, saying that this isn't really your doing. They've got to be looking at you too, and that must be a major concern for you.
it's not a concern, Rick, because um, I'm familiar with the court system. I was a federal regulator, provincial regulator. Once I got enough information that I could make a case, I submitted that letter to all the federal authorities, the law societies, the RCMP. They all got my initial. Essentially, the way it works, I would be first witness, right? And when it comes down to what they were doing, I have enough witnesses to prove that I didn't know anything about it. So I had to play along with some things in it, but you got to do that to expose the con. When you have to report a con of this magnitude, you have to have some fairly significant evidence, or the regulators will not buy in that they have something to, like if people complain that they had $100 billion removed, sure, they go after those Ponzi scams, big ones. But when it's subtle and it's identity fraud, identity theft, corporate theft,
Right.
all those, you got to stack them.
But because of your association with these groups, it's smearing your reputation and throwing a lot of things in question. Because even as I go back and I look at some newspaper articles, I see that you, there's references made to you. I think there was a tobacco farmer here in Ontario who claimed to be part of an ASMIN community, ended up in court because he was trying to evade taxes, and then they're mentioning you as going to court to, I guess, support him as a member of the community, but the government not recognizing it. So this becomes very, very complicated. So how does that all play into this?
I'll explain that.
Yeah.
Before that case, there was a case in BC, and the case in BC, which I didn't know anything about it until recently. My name was on it, and then the court said I can no longer put any cases into court. I didn't know anything about it. I just come out of surgery. I just got back to Canada, right? Mm-hmm. And then that tobacco case, well, guess what? A day before the court case, I was asked to go and sit there and pretend I was someone, and I didn't know anything about the case, right? And that was when they said I was in the court. The lawyers said I was an Indian guru. And they said I was all dressed up in Aboriginal garb, which is BS. And they made fairly racial, and I had no idea. Like I don't want to emphasize my medical recovery, but I was suffering from COVID at that time, right? So they had me come into a couple of cases. I didn't know till the last minute. And I don't have to justify as the victim of the identity that I was the victim, right? Like if you're the victim, yeah, they're going to dupe you on things, right? But that's all right. I'm an open book. They can get whatever information they want, and they will see that I was duped, and they were abusing me, abusing my trust, stealing my name, putting emails out that Wabiskaw at equity.com and telling people that they're me and communicating with them. And I have no knowledge of that email or being part of that email. It's identity theft. It's a very smooth con from my point of view, allegedly. Okay.
And then you've got these people going through these naming ceremonies as well, and this stuff's readily available online as well. Can you explain what's that? So here's this. What's that all about? Because I don't really understand. And we see some pretty prominent politicians here. Patrick Brown and Tony Clement, former finance minister of Ontario, Brown, the former leader of the Ontario PCs, now mayor of Brampton. This gentleman here, Mr. Lowe, I believe his name was, and then Patrick Brown signing this certificate for him,
Yeah.
recognizing his naming and his colonial name, I guess, I think was Headlow or something like that. And then, but his name here, Big Bear Running, to
Dave
become
Lowe.
part of the ASMIN community. There's Mr. Brown's signature. Can you explain what that is all about and when that took place and how you were involved? Because you were at this ceremony as well, right?
Yeah, I officiated that. They asked me to officiate at a naming ceremony. Is fine. They had drummers down from up in Midland and everything. You know, it was a nice little get together, a little powwow. Naming ceremonies are fine. Anyone can have a spirit name. Okay. This was another group out of Barrie that had a small little group, a private little group, a community, right? And they wanted to have a naming ceremony. But the Mr. Lau, the gentleman with the Métis sash, you know, all that Tony Clement and all that, he used to work for Tony Clement. So he got Tony Clement to come down and do a naming ceremony, and I officiated the naming ceremony. But they weren't part of ASMIN.
Okay.
Okay, that was just a naming ceremony, just like pulling down any elder to come down and do a naming ceremony. I did a naming ceremony with them, and they had another gentleman who has a big film industry. He came and filmed and took interviews and everything of everybody. It was a kind of nice event, which is fine. There was no con on that because everybody at the naming ceremony were all relatives that were working with Mr. Lowe, and they all wanted spirit names. So they got spirit names.
Now here's this, that lady in the center right there. There's you with her.
Yeah.
Is that not the lady from the Power Shift?
I have no idea. I can't remember. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who it is. So then she was named at this ceremony as well, and now she's online and part of. I can't. She seems to be part of this network, either loosely or even directly involved with this freedom movement. She calls it the Power Shift, and they're on there selling memberships into this, what they call the Canadian People's Union, talking about, really, I would characterize it as common law information, coming up with like legal remedies to these things. It seems to me that this is another case where maybe it's not an appropriate use of a spirit name, and she's not really pushing her spirit name when I watch her videos, but she certainly continuously talks about the need for integration, or to work for colonial settlers to work with or become part of First Nations or Aboriginal communities. It's all through her work. This, to me, ties right into everything that you've been saying, where it's just it's like a carbon copy of the blueprint, right?
Well, it seems, Rick, like all these ones coming originally from the U.S., the sovereign citizen. You can get them all over to YouTube there on stuff like that. But they're all grabbing certain things that sounds good and utilizing in their own stories. Yeah. And I can't comment on what all these other people are. All I can comment on is that there is a movement out there. It's a big movement because everybody's really ticked off with their governments. Really ticked off that the governments are spending more money than they should be and doing silly things. And also a lot of people, like, I'm not against immigration, right? But a lot of people are really ticked off that, like in the U.S., bringing all the immigrants across the border illegally, right, to boost up their numbers. Because if you come in illegally and they let you in here, you're going to vote for them. And it's all voting friendly. I'll bring the people in so they vote. You look at our current government. No disrespect. I know a lot of, how would I say, ethnic people from around the world. Some, even my brother-in-law was an ethnic from another country, right? I have no problems with that. But people who have been here for a while get a little upset about what's going on, both in Canada and the United States. It's all this woke stuff. Everything. There's so much confusion. So that gives you the opportunity to infiltrate and look for those people that are needy, want something, and let's sell them a story that maybe they'll give them some hope. In the meantime, oh, pay for contributing this noble attempt to do something in the future, right? My case, I had a legal land claim into the government. They refused to meet because there's 640 some other land claims ahead of me, right? The Queen instructed the Governor General to instruct Trudeau to negotiate, as by their law under the Royal Proclamation. They're on unsurrendered lands, and there's a lot. Every treaty in Canada, as far as I'm concerned, as a lay person in law, in international law, if you violate one section of a treaty, the whole treaty is null and void. Every treaty in Canada is null and void, except maybe some of the current ones, because they violate different sections, right? So it's a big mess that the government themselves created. So when the governments create a venue for someone to come in and create a really good scam, and if these people who are doing the scam are very well educated, they're going to manipulate it so it sounds really good, and let's get the money flow. Oh, and in my case, let's not tell the chief how much money's coming in. Let's put it in our own bank accounts, right? And if you go back, and I know you go some of those other videos I did, I said we're self-supporting by our own contributions. We've never asked for any money. And one of the later videos I did while I'm trying to figure out what's going on said, we haven't asked for money from the government. We don't want to ask for money. We just want that right that says they have to come down by their laws and sign treaty with us. So that's
as part of that process, though, you would get reconciliation, and that would lead to, I would think, payments. And also, I mean, if you look at it,
well, I wouldn't make that. I wouldn't make that assumption, Rick, because
okay, yeah,
they only give money to those people they've already signed treaty to, and every other group in Canada that says, hey, we're this group and we're that group, and oh, let's fund money, because if I fund that money in that local riding, I get all the votes from them, right? But as a multicultural Canada, I'm the only group with all my relatives that we can't self-profess to be who we are. That's a really strange situation. So when we're trying to fight for our rights, everybody's saying we're taking away from their rights. I don't get funded. I've been on the poverty row for like 20 years because of my medical disabilities.
It becomes very, complex when you start to look at it. It depends on the lens you look at it through. But even as I go to this Facebook page, ASMIN of Turtle Island. This is
that one.
Right. I'm sorry, what's that?
I don't even recognize that one.
Yeah, well, you're on here.
I do.
they put you on.
I recognize it. They've got you in a couple of places that I think they may have forgotten that you're still up there.
And this is just you with a holiday greeting, a video that whoever they are, put up. And then, but this was interesting. This is, this led me down a path, an interesting path. This gentleman here, Errol Star Francis, he, born in Jamaica, as far as I can tell, yet a Juno Award-winning performer, described here on this Facebook page as one of the original, or one of the first, how did they put this here? I'll get you to comment on it, but he's supposed to be one of the first Ask It Council members. One of the first, right there at the top. I highlighted it. So he's one of the first, but he's originally, I guess, from Jamaica. But, it seems to me that he has this entertainment company called Tribes, Tribz, right? And then I think, again, this, and you comment for me, is this an appropriate use of an association with an ASMIN community? Because it looks to me like he's taking he's availing himself of federal arts grants in order to make music videos and find legitimacy within the Canadian entertainment industry, while saying that he's part of an Aboriginal or Indian, or whatever language you care to use at any given time, group. But he's from Jamaica. Now, I guess by extension, that's part of Turtle Island, but I'm not sure that the government of Canada owes someone like Errol Starr Francis anything based on any of this. But it's pretty easy, again, to convince even politicians or bureaucrats who are looking to virtue signal to bring someone like that in. I mean, I see how this all works, right? So
Well,
please clarify or explain to me what the heck is going on with that.
Well, Rick, you have just joined my
Hit the
club.
nail on the head. Yes.
You joined my club, and I'll verily believe everything you said is correct. It's exposing the cons and the multi-layers of cons. And when you look at the opportunity with the government giving out monies to everybody and ethnic groups and everything, boy, that would be a good candidate to give money to support the Black Month when we have an Aboriginal Day, right?
Well, he checks a lot of the boxes, right?
Yeah. So
for political
I'll let
correctness.
you say that what your comments are something that should be looked into. I didn't even know this was there, right? And if this is the case, it's all promotion based on Indigenous, which they use, right? And him, the first founding member of a council. Up until recently, I didn't even know they set up all these new councils. And guess what, Rick? I was never invited to sit on any council. Well, that's interesting if it's the ASMIN up until the 1st of May, I guess, or the end of April. ASMIN was all about me on the original website that they've taken down, the ASMIN of Turtle Island. It's my genealogy, all my family names. The clan mother is First Nation was mentioned there. There was a bitchway to a First Nation Aboriginal. All that stuff was there until I said, and I was the flea in the ointment, right? Because as I'm still there, you don't know how to get rid of me. As soon as I said, "Oh, I'm retiring," right? And then the whole card deck expose the multi-layers of, I'm going to use it, I'll give credit, ingenious thought, right?
Well, I'm not saying even that Errol Starr Francis has done anything illegal, but he certainly seems to know how to work the system.
Rick, I'm going to interject. Did I hear you say something along the lines that Errol Starr Francis had received funding and grants through this?
I mean, he's won a Juno Award. I know how the system works, right? So when I go watch his videos, it's a high budget Canadian entertainment industry. They're
funding somewhere is what you're saying.
and they become eligible. They become eligible for a wide variety of arts grants to produce music videos because you check the boxes. That's how those things work, whether it's the Canada Council or, I mean, you go down the list, right? So by associating himself with an ASMIN nation and even being one of the original founders, this opens doors to funding. And if you go look at his videos, I won't play it because of copyright issues, but I mean, it's high budget. I've never heard of the guy before. I don't know how many people watch his stuff. It's not in my in my sphere of entertainment choices. I don't listen to that kind of music, but this is serious money.
Yes,
right?
it is.
To produce that kind of material.
It is.
If you're
Along with a lot of the other things that we're, seeing come out of all of this. So I would like to ask Grand Chief a question and have his answer on here. If you have people, and I'm having them come to me currently, who are or have been a part of this ASMIN situation and they were members, now they're going to somewhere else because they can't get the click button to work in ASMIN, so they want to join somewhere else. They are scattering like flies off manure when you walk by because they realize that something's going on inside of ASMIN. So what's your answer to them when they say they're going to go find somewhere else to sign up at, and there's no background or no lineage check? You can just anybody join.
Well, in the vernacular of investigations, called collateral damage. Buyer beware. There is so much going on that there's no way I could even comprehend all the different cons and subcons and criminalities that could potentially verily believe to be going on. Everybody is looking for something because, and it's my opinion, I verily believe it's because of the way the government of Canada has been running for many years. It's all directed about getting, and this is my opinion, them making sure they get elected every 2 years or whatever, every 4 years, twice, so they can get their pensions. And they have no idea what a government is all about. A lot of amateurs running the government of Canada and the United States. And it's all about getting their retirement benefits. And when it comes down to people that have real issues like Aboriginal rights, well, look at what Trudeau's done in regards to the reconciliation. Sweet F all, right? F is just a letter, so I can say that, right? Yeah, it's difficult times. All they're worrying about is getting elected. You know, why do we have millions of refugees coming in to Canada at this juncture in time? What was the need, right? We don't have housing. They're all getting, I could get into the United States issue, which I'm following as well. Millions of people flooding into our countries. Is that part of the New World Order? So when it comes down to little old me and my nation and my family, we're of no significance. So anyone who's got a really good con can work the con. And that's where we're at. But
the difficult thing here is that based on because of the way the law has evolved, the interpretations, UNDRIP, all of these things, these other groups can, in my view, kind of put forward similar arguments to justify what they're doing based on adoption into an ASMIN community, and then it becomes very cloudy even within the court system. So even when you get these rulings like the Daniels ruling, that they're saying, well, it only applies from Ontario West. It doesn't apply to people out in Eastern Canada. And they're picking and choosing who gets rights and who doesn't, even through this system. It becomes very complicated. And I'm not even sure if these rulings we're getting through the court system are fair or balanced or even accurate.
well, then they never are. They never are. But that's a functionality of the actual corrupt government itself. The government is not there to run the nation for the people that are supporting the nation through taxation. And this is where they allow these sovereign entities, sovereign citizen entities, start to have all these anarchy groups come in underneath their watch because they're not providing what they're supposed to do as the board of directors, as the corporation of the Constitutional Monarchy of Canada. They're supposed to be running an official, effective governance.
So clarify this for me. What is the difference? Like, I don't really completely buy into like Canada is only a corporation. It is a sovereign nation state.
It's not a sovereign nation state. Okay, Rick.
Okay.
You're
Yeah.
right in the meat of it. Okay.
Mhm.
Terminologies. Canada is a trade colony still of Britain. The Constitution 1982 wasn't signed in Canada. It was signed in Great Britain. And I don't think it still has had the approval of the Privy Council of England. So what is it? It's a trade corporation. The Constitution of Canada is actually a letter of marque by the Crown to do business in Canada. I found it very interesting when I was trying to find out what this Constitutional Monarchy of Canada was. Remember when they had the annual report, and Harper government put the annual report, They had all these advertisements of all the greatness that Canada was doing. It's the report to the U.S. Security Commission. And still, if you go into the EDGARs, which is the U.S., I forget what EDGARs is for. It's the money
the
thing.
role. Yep, it's like the CRA and the IRS. It's literally tells you that they are part of the U.S. And their address is in Washington D.C.
Yeah, and if you call up, the last time I checked, I call up the number. It went to Revenue Canada, right? They're corporations. Okay, so
my question is, what's the difference between that and your corporation, which you set up?
My
and why are you any more legitimate than that?
Well, the corporation I've got is not legitimate because it's a license from the government of Canada to have that name.
Yeah.
But it's just to protect the name. It's like a copyright. That's it.
Or a trademark.
But even that protection, though, stems from the colonial system, the Canadian system, right?
That's all you
No.
That's all
Imagine if there was nothing on it. What would Grand Chief have done right now?
Well, right. I mean, I'm not criticizing you for it. Right. I'm just kind of trying to make a point that any political system is a construct. It's what people believe ultimately and what the people end up supporting, either because they're afraid through coercion and tyranny at the end of the gun, or because as a community, we all decide together that this is what we are going to support and make legitimate. So that can extend to either an ASMIN community, or it could be, the Canadian government, or even a one world government if people ultimately ended up supporting that, either through fear or voluntarily. But I'll throw it back to you for comment.
Yeah, Rick, you're right. And the issue here is not the World Economic Forum or the United Nations, what is the definition of a nation? A nation is an old boys club. I've got a military, you've got a military. Let's not fight, so we'll recognize each other. That old word recognition. Okay, well, I got might, you've got might, so let's be friends, right? That's all recognition is. I'm going to fund you because you're helping me do something else, right? I'll fund you, and then you'll do what I say because I fund you. All these things are wrapped up in everything we're talking about today. So if you have someone, I'll just say alleged, that's legitimate, has an Aboriginal ancestry, has a family history, goes back to the whole founding of New France, who is saying, hey, guys, your rules say that you're supposed to come and sign treaty to me, because anyone who, in the Royal Proclamation, which is in their constitution, which is upheld by the Queen or the King now, right? Because that's where our constitution was signed. It says if anyone does any frauds in my territory, right?
Yep.
You have to bring them to the crown and be charged with malfeasance of treason in the Royal Proclamation. They're supposed to be charged with treason. Harper government removed treason from the Criminal Code of Canada, but the Constitution is supreme to the Criminal Code of Canada. So where we have is you've got structures that are huge, that have got history to them. And how do you change that? Well, you don't.
And like it or not, you still have to work within that system, even as you seek remedy to these legal digressions against you, as you're asserting here, because you don't have a police force, you don't have a military, you don't have a legal system of your own, so you have to rely on RCMP, CSIS, FBI, other organizations, Indian Affairs even, to assist you in finding some sort of justice for this.
Going back to your comment, how come you let this happen? Essentially, I'm not saying that you said it exactly. Like you were involved with these people and it basically happened on your watch.
I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but I guess.
And I accept that, right? I knew it was happening on my watch, but how do I break that multi-generational dysfunctionality of the Canadian government and how they interact with voters so they can get voting and all those complex of the world economic? Who am I? I'm just one person who's representing my family, right? And I got to break it down and get it to a point where I can actually take it to those official regulators to do something to destroy this whole new philosophy of pretend Indian and infiltrating for funding, like that lady who went up to Inuvik or wherever, or up in the north, who said her two daughters were Inuit and she got hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's been arrested again for another fraud, right? You know, you get these pretend Indians that go to university and get all this stuff, right? And they say, you know, they get all these, well, the whole, you know, the whole pretend Indian thing, right?
Well, the Buffy St. Marie story that CBC did the expose on, and
yeah,
all of these things. And you know, it seems to me too,
it's
Grand
a new
Chief, that
trend. It's a new
sorry,
trend.
yeah.
It's
And
a new
so
trend.
and the irony in those photos that I showed is that the government doesn't even recognize ASMIN as a legitimate, in their view, legitimate Aboriginal community. And yet here we have politicians like Patrick Brown and Tony Clement. And who's this other guy? He also, I think, ran for the leadership, Rod Jackson. Remember,
Once the
one
federal,
time prevention, you
yeah,
know, so they're
they're
kind of like, I see that as like a virtue signaling on their part, or how are they? I don't know why they're even there involved if they don't if the government doesn't recognize the community. But not to say that every politician views things the same way. What is that again all about?
It's all politicking. You got Tony Clement,
Policy.
who's
Yep.
recognizing his old buddy, who's got a small little community, a family-based community in Barrie. You got the federal and the provincial representative for Barrie there.
Yeah.
You got a film producer filming everything, right? Hey,
Mhm.
we'll get some new votes. And I don't want, and I'll say allegedly that was the motivation for that, right? There was nothing
Yes,
wrong
sure,
with the get together. It's a
sure,
family-based
yeah.
Aboriginal community, blah blah blah, and they get some political hits for it, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and it looks very virtuous to
yeah,
the general public. Like, look how sensitive I am,
yeah,
But
right.
and how woke.
it also leads to trying to get votes in the end. It's all a
Yeah.
politic game. And as much as I hate to say this, you guys are discussing, you know, a sensitive subject, enforcement on the side of these nations that are unceded or unbanded nations. You still wind up having to figure out how enforcement is happening, which is what he's leading to here. He's going to have to rely upon some of the colonial system to help enforce the wrongdoing here and cause the consequence from it to fall on the shoulders of those that it's required. In that aspect, though, here we go again. We're nations inside of a nation. And as much as we may not enjoy the colonial system, we know that it's a broke system. We smell the desperation from the colonial people to come in and seek sovereignty through our laws so that they're free from the taxes and the corrupt that's going on in the colonial. The bottom line is just like any other nation. If it's China versus Iran, you're still stuck congregating with them and trying to communicate and make nation to nation work, even though we're inside those soils. So we still have to have the communication door open somewhere along the way with Indian Affairs, FBI, those type of things. Even once we do align our own enforcement, should your nation become large enough to be an enforcement of its own. So it's politics all around. And in that instance, it causes all the confusion as well, like the photos you're showing.
Yeah, and some of that earlier, which I don't know how much time you got, Rick, but I'll talk forever because that's what my job is as a chief, right? That it's funny. There was here's what the government does. They hired this gentleman who was a professor at a university. Coincidentally, his family name is one of my family names, right? A French Canadian, to look at all these groups, right? So he never contacted me, refused my emails, and he put me down as some kind of flake little organization. So I'm on the list of flake little organizations because the government funded this guy to just like looking for flying saucers, right? They're all fake, right? Never contacted me. So he's got this federal funding to prove that I don't exist, right? My own federal MP is the head of Aboriginal Affairs here in Canada. She refuses to meet with me. And under the laws in Canada, the only way you get access to a government is to call your federal MP. Well, my federal MP is the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. So she sent me the latest letter is, well, I can't help you with this pretend Indian issue, but have a wonderful day. That's interesting, right? That shows that obviously I will give her credit. She probably never saw my letter. It's her staff writing these letters out, right? I won't discredit her, but that's a pretty good slap in the face of one of her constituents who's having a major issue with these pretend Indians. At the same time I wrote that letter, they have a big conference in Manitoba about pretend Indians, and they're going to do legislation now against pretend Indians and all that, so they can decrease all these wannabe Indians. All these colonials are, instead of resolving the issue of the government and how they fund things and what they do and how they misappropriate monies and spend money on things they shouldn't do, and the people are all upset, so they're going to punish the people now, right, who are trying to find some resolve. So all these people who sign on to these multitudinous of little Aboriginal communities looking for some relief, or at least I'm doing something, right? We'll join this group to do something, right? I feel sorry for them. There's nothing I can do. I've been on this road for 20 years to resolve my grandfather's request to do something, because when he sat me on his knee and gave me all my teachings and everything, he was a Métis boat builder, Wabashini. He was a cook at a lumber camp he was born in 1882, my grandfather, right? How do you change that historical context to the future? And he told me, you go learn the colonial ways, you can get an education. That's why I went to forestry school, then I went fish and wildlife technology, then got a Bachelor of Science degree, right? And then I got a job with the federal government up in Ottawa, working towards this end, to learn the system, to figure it out, and to do this thing, right? It's difficult. So you've got an ordinary person who hasn't been doing it all their life, and all of a sudden, oh, I have an Aboriginal ancestor, I want my rights. Well, I'm sorry, you're not going to get any rights, because if someone has the legitimacy to get those rights, and the government won't even talk to them, but they'll fund, hey, I'm from Mars, right? I'm purple. I want to set up a community center. Oh, how much money do you want? Right? That's the government. That's how it's a vote-based government. If you can prove to me that you're going to get me votes, I will fund you. But I've stolen your land, and we're supposed to sign treaty with you, and we aren't going to meet with you, and we're not going to sign treaty because you might cost us some money, because we know we already stole your land. And right now we've got the colonization of the colonization of the colonization. It's starting again. Let's bring in all those immigrants like they did when they took over the lands of Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont and their people out in the Red River Valley. Bring in all the people from Eastern Europe because they're starving, and settle the prairies, right? Oh, those Aboriginals don't have any rights over there. All those colonials have all the rights, right? That's it. So they're duplicating the same process of colonization, right? And they have the divine right to do colonization, though the Pope said they took away the doctrine of discovery, right? Well, if you've taken away the doctrine of discovery and you bought the Rupert's land from the Hudson Bay Company that didn't own it, and now you own the lands, that you only had a thing to put forts up and do fur trade, right? It was a letter of marque. So they're doing the piracy thing still. They're doing it again, right? So we won't recognize you, so we can steal your land still. We're continuing the theft of your land. That's what we're living in. Now, I'm not trying to be reactionary or, complain or make complaints, right? It's the...
Well, when I see philosophers or political commentators like Ilan Pape, and when I see what's going on in Gaza and... all of these things. And it's basically this anti-colonial political ideology that is permeating its way all through, really it's global, but here in Canada, it's having serious implications because it ties right into exactly what we're talking about here. It's about Aboriginals, UNDRIP, property rights, land back. These protests that we're seeing going on right now on university campuses, it's been my position that is not just a Palestinian or Gaza or his Jewish issue or Zionist issue. It ties right into, even more so in Canada, into this very issue we're talking about right here, right now. Can you connect those dots for us?
Oh, they're all connected. It's total chaos, and the World Economic Forum has done it. This climate change issue has done it. There's so much fear out there. See, Churchill said it very nicely. If you keep people in fear, they won't know what's going on in the legislature.
But
And
if these protesters are successful, it seems to me they want to basically tear the system down. And
yes,
yet, if you're talking about, and I will use the word First Nations who have treaties, those treaties are really protected because of the existence of Canada as a country. If the system is torn down, would those treaties then not become null and void? And would that then not put the sovereignty of those nations within a nation maybe in jeopardy? Does that not put the culture of those First Nations communities in jeopardy? Kind of reset everything? If you want to talk about a great reset, that would be one heck of a great reset, because now you have to kind of revisit a lot of these land rights issues, territorial issues all over again, right from the very beginning.
yeah, all of that stuff, what you're saying is true. It's a big, they've done it. And the only way you can get out of that kind of mess is to make wars. And where are we headed right now? Third World War. It's going to happen. Russia's falling apart. North Korea's going crazy. You got wars in Gaza. You got wars in Syria. There's so much going on. And that's part of that whole, as far as I verily believe, the World Economic Forum to make a one world government. And who is the Carl Schwab? What is Carl Schwab doing? He's saying that he said it right at Harvard. He owned Trudeau, right? So you've got fractions and different groups that will have no understanding of what's going on. And so if the climate change comes and there's a bit, there's more pollution coming out of volcanoes than ever did by the anthropogenic environmental contamination. Look, you got Naples, that volcano could go off. You got the one, Mount St. Helens is acting up. You got the ones down on the Ring of Fire. They're all Iceland. If they get that big boom at Iceland, you're going to see pollution all over the place. Yeah. And that will put us in an ice age, right? This climate change is all bogus. It's all about manipulating the stocks and manipulating the markets. It's something that's gone amiss since the Second World War. My dad is a veteran of the war. He lost his leg. He's an amp. He's passed now. His brother was an amp. I lost 3 uncles in World War II. My mom was in the military to protect freedom. And what do we get come back? Oh, we don't recognize you. I had the government, which was pretty good that time, put me on that International Joint Commission to negotiate treaties on the Boundary Waters Treaty Act of 1906 for the Great Lakes water quality. And they appointed 3 Aboriginals, 1 from U.S. and 2 in Canada. I was one of them, to recommend all the things, because I was with the federal government in all the toxic chemicals and all that, right? That was my area of work. And I get back, guess what? I get a phone call from my old boss. Oh, they don't want to recognize you now. Now that you did the job they wanted you to do we're not going to recognize you, not going to talk to you. So it's all about control structures and what the politicians want to do. It has nothing to do with providing proper services to the people that support them through the taxations. Billions of dollars going up and all the scandals about Trudeau and everything. It's all there. It's plain to see. So you have all this fake news, etc. And that's where we are right now, because you have the opportunity for scammers to come in and try to get a piece of the gravy. And that's what we're at. And peeling the onion, and it is a stinky onion, peeling that onion to get through all the different permutations of everything. And you picked up one I didn't know about, Errol Francis and his promotion of all those websites started to become immediately even before that, because they were selling some kind of phones that were supposed to tap into everybody's internet, and you get free internet because you're stealing it from someone else, right? There's all these, and Chief there can talk about the phone scenario, right? There's all these scams of them promoting themselves for stuff. Now, in regards to the main scam is to drive funding into this, because you're going to get rights. So they're lying. Invest, and there was even an investment link. Invest in this and you'll get 50% of your return. Oh, that's a security commission fraud, right? Mm-hmm. You can't say how much you're going to get for an investment. They had it right on the website. Now all that stuff's being pulled down and they're revamping and everything. Then they got this other ASMIN of the Boreal Forest. She's the 27th descendant of the Louis of the whatever way back when, right? So how does that give you Aboriginal rights? And she's got my ASMIN my ASMIN name right on our website. But interesting, the Ask It for Equity pulled off, the two pulled off that site. So they're using multiple sites, and they'll probably, unless they're listening to this, they'll probably put up more websites to get people sucked into to fund. It's a massive scam. It's very complex, and I'm still learning more aspects of what they're doing. I had no idea this.
And to be recognized by these organizations is probably not going to help anybody anyway, because the federal government doesn't recognize them. And so if you're trying to assert rights or protect your property rights based on this, it's the colonial system
That's
that
right.
ultimately is going to determine whether your property rights are protected or not.
Well, your property rights aren't protected, period, because of the Expropriation Act. Right? If they need to put a super highway through like that Star Trek one,
Right.
where
But the point being, they're not really providing any kind of a service at all if everything that we have said here holds true.
It's not. It is not. And I beseech everyone to walk with caution with that. As I've said, putting out fires on our end, because we have had more than one try to assert themselves as ASMIN in the courtroom, came back out and called me up. I didn't even know the person, basically told me I just got slapped in the face with a wet towel by the judge, who literally said, what do you expect out of this? What is your lineage? Because there is some onus on you to prove your lineage. And anywhere that is signing you up as a membership without asking any of those questions for the rights that you're trying to claim, tax-free. I have rights that you can't take my children, so forth and so on. These things have to be proven. You can't just say it and so be it.
So we're walking on eggshells there, because as soon as you start going down that road, it raises questions about genetics, ethnicity, race. These are landmines when it comes to political correctness, especially after World War II. You start talking about anything in that vein, and people get very, very nervous. The government included, I think. So it's very delicate matters. But I guess the thing is, for you, this isn't so much an ethnicity or race issue. It's more of a cultural issue.
it's both, Rick. It's both.
Yep.
I have a culture. I have a culture, the Métis culture. It was very represented across. In fact, when Gordon was attacked in the Sudan, I think in the 1800s or whatever, they went and got the Métis boatmen to bring the British Army up the Sudan. Highly respected. Now you say you're a Métis. Oh, you must be from out west. And what do? Oh, and the funding they get is canoes, trips across the Great Lakes, right? They don't talk about our culture. In Ontario, when they studied, they had to put in their curriculum Aboriginal culture. Oh, we'll study Inuit, Indians, and Métis all as one, right? Oh, by the way, Métis have a stash. Okay, give me a break, right? They don't teach our history because they stole the lands of the Aboriginal people. Okay, and so there has been multi-generational attempts to